Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. Over the last few months, we've been able to cover various features of the next WoW expansion, The War Within. From its all-friendly systems such as the warbands, new forms of open-world endgame content of the Delves, as well as the class-defining hero talents, which help expand on our class fantasy as we climb to a new max level. The last few weeks have given us quite a bit of additional information on the upcoming hero talents, with new subspecs unveiled for priests, hunters, druids, mages, and a handful of other classes. The reveal begs for even more feedback from the community, with everyone welcome to comment their thoughts on the inherent ideas, design choices, and even gameplay aspects that this new system will bring. While a lot of players are excited for the hero talents, a number of the community have voiced their concerns regarding the system, with some fearing that it adds needless complexity and bloat to the current class design, which isn't great. In today's video, I want to take a long, extended look at some of the upcoming talents and how I would go about to fix them to breathe life into what is meant to be an evergreen system going forward. At the end of the day, I really would want War Within expansion to be a good one, and I wish to throw my hat into the ring and offer solutions as to how I think they could upgrade this system of hero talents going forward. But right before that, most of you guys watching these kind of update videos are still not subscribed. However, the more of you remind, the more of you do. So let's keep it going. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell if you're watching these videos anyway. Especially if you want to get more regular content regarding the next upcoming World of Warcraft expansion, The War Within. Before we get into the details, I first want to do a quick refresher. What are hero talents? Hero talents are a new self-contained talent trees that players will unlock at level 71. They are an evergreen form of character progression for each class specialization that introduces new powers and class fantasies. Players can choose a single hero talent tree to activate on a character, and those talents can be changed in the same way that class talents can be currently adjusted in-game. There are 3 hero talent trees for each class except for Druid, which has 4 since they have 4 specs, or Demon Hunters who have access to 2. Each specialization has 2 hero talent trees that they can choose between, and each of those trees is available as an option for 2 specializations. There are overall 11 nodes in a hero talent tree, and the first of these unlocks with the system at level 71, and you earn 1 talent point per level from 71 to 80, so you get every talent of the tree by level 80. And just to make sure that we're all crystal clear about how these talents work, because I've seen a lot of misunderstanding floating around the entire system, of all those 11 nodes, majority of them are passive ones that you'll unlock, and you'll unlock all of them. You don't have to pick and choose some of them, you unlock the entire thing. There are about 3 to 4 choice nodes that are all thematic, as in defensive choices will be placed against other defensives, utility choices against other utility, things like mobility or slowing your target for instance, and offensive nodes will be placed against offensive choice nodes as well. Each hero spec has a starting node, which usually helps define that hero talent tree, and a capstone talent, which helps tie off the rest of the tree with a powerful gameplay bonus. And my first impressions of the hero talent tree system has been a good one thus far. For one, this talent expansion system is meant to be an evergreen feature that builds upon existing talents without destroying or ruining established build combinations. When Blizzard eventually announced the new expansion, a lot of players expanded for our talent trees to grow downwards, kind of like how they did with TBC or Wrath of the Lich King. Their reasoning against this and instead doing the hero talent system instead is that all talents were fairly narrow. This meant overall that there were a lot less combinations available, but as you picked up talents heading further down the rows, you weren't destroying everything that came before it. You simply created new synergies on top of what existed. Our Dragonflight talents are fairly wide instead of narrow, with interconnected passive and active abilities, and this wideness of the current talents offers a lot of potential combination options, too many in fact, which means adding more options further down can really upset the balance of everything that came before it. Hero talents, very similar to Legion artifact weapons, offer a lot of passives and maybe one active ability to help enhance parts of your talent tree, but it doesn't destroy the base concepts that came before it. It just makes you want to lean into particular playstyles. Kind of like how when you get a new tier set bonus, it makes you want to lean into specific talents in order to emphasize the gameplay that the tier set offers, which naturally makes certain talent choices your top priority, but it doesn't erase the existing synergies that came before it. Over the last few weeks, we got a bit of a preview regarding some of the hero talents coming in the War Within, and so far a lot of them have been a bit of a mixed bag. Based on the community reception, it's pretty easy to put them in various categories, from the ones that the community found the most confusing to some that have potential but could probably do a bit of work, while a handful can be put in that excellent category, where they're not 100% perfect, but there's definitely a spark of greatness within them that could make them a really good and a compelling choice to spec into. First, let's get to the confusing ones, starting with the Oracle Priest, which offers you a different version of power infusion called Premonition. When you first use the Premonition ability, the ability will start to cycle through different available buffs, 3 available to you at first, that can then be cast on your allies. Those buffs are going to be a healing increase, which can be applied on an ally, or simply a magic damage or a physical damage increase. Those 3 buffs can then be turned into 5 buffs as you go further down into the talent tree and talent yourself accordingly to also increase your allies' mana or increase their haste for a handful of seconds. Each aspect of the spell is off the global cooldown, so you can use it a bit more easily when it comes to applying buffs or starting the cycle in between of you weaving your healing abilities to primarily focus on supporting your allies. Overall, this does offer a complex buff mechanic where you have to time your buffs on specific allies appropriately. Lots of buffs could be good in very specific situations, so knowing which buffs to use where is important. Being a buff-focused playstyle, it's really going to enforce altruism, so if you don't enjoy the playstyle of Augmentation Evoker, then there's a good chance that you will not enjoy this mechanic altogether. Then again, when it comes to endgame content, a lot of priests, healers in general, or even tanks, will do things outside of their primary role in order to guarantee their group success. Whether it is doing more damage during downtime when nobody needs healing so you can make certain boss DPS checks, or volunteering to deal with certain mechanics so that the DPS players and tanks can keep focused on hitting the boss as hard as humanly possible. Players have always, at high end, have gone out of the way to do as much as they can to increase the chances of their group's success. So to give Disc Priest and Holy Priest a hero spec that's focused on group success makes sense in my head. There's definitely a discussion about the complexity of this ability, but I'm not really against the ambitious design that comes with the spell. And at this very moment, I can't really criticize the ability unless we can get some hands-on impressions first. If I were to give any criticism to this ability, I would really go after the RNG aspect of a talent called Clairvoyance, which can sometimes grant you, or whatever target you pick, as well as a couple other allies around them, all of the buffs of Premonition at 100% effectiveness. As somebody who plays Outlaw Rogue quite often, I know what's it like to roll a 5 buff combo, so this is basically the 5 buff version, but for Priest instead. Relying on RNG while also trying to play around with a complex mechanic I don't think is great for this Priest playstyle, and I think it just deserves a little bit more control with a high downtime cooldown, like a 3-minute or a 5-minute cooldown of Clairvoyance, just so you can guarantee that you have the buff during very crucial moments. I also think it would be nice if this hero spec gained a bit more visual clarity without the need of weak auras or add-ons, even though everybody is going to be using them if you are going to be picking up Oracle Priest. Ideally, what I'd like to see is some kind of a new form of visual clues that a newer player who just picked up Oracle Priest that can maybe mess around with the ability for like 10 minutes could at least like start picking it up and properly playing it in group content, aware and knowing of which buffs are available at all times. At the same time, I don't really expect for a new player to be able to play this ability flawlessly. It is an extra additional skill ceiling that all priests are going to have to play into if they do pick up Oracle. I just hope they can generate enough context clues for a new player to at least start using the ability, even if they're not playing it optimally. Overall though, I don't hate the ambitious design, even if it is complex. I don't necessarily want World of Warcraft to just stagnate on some of the ideas and gameplay mechanics and spell abilities. I really like when they get creative and try something new. Like, if it feels terrible to play, definitely make some changes, keep a close ear to the community, but I don't hate the creativity and the ambitious design that they so far have come up with. The next one, while we're talking about complicated hero talents, is the Lightsmith Paladin. For Lightsmith Paladins, their main ability allows you to place armaments and shields on the ground. These armaments can either be, like I said, a shield, which can generate an absorption effect for an ally who picks it up every few seconds, or a weapon, which causes that ally to sometimes deal additional damage or healing as holy magic. More buff management gameplay to deal with in between of tanking or healing does create more complexity but also more friction, since now the paladin has to have extra awareness of their allies' position to safely grant them some of their armaments. Easily, I think this could be fixed by allowing you to target specific players with shields or weapons, or choose to place him on the ground if you don't have a target in mind. I just think it'd be awful if, let's say, your raid is stacked instead of a Spirit Link Totem all clumped together, and you're trying to target the Unholy Death Knight who's got his cooldowns rolling, but you accidentally hit the Holy Priest instead, and I think just some more accuracy when it comes to casting would be greatly appreciated. Another aspect of the Lightsmith, which has been pointed out by Holy Paladin Theorcrafters, has been the talent of Valiance, which could be kind of problematic. Essentially, Holy Paladins with enough critical strike will be able to maintain this buff permanently. All you need is for Holy Shocks to critical strike to gain Infusion of Light, then consume Infusion with a Judgment or a Flash of Light. And with the current design of Holy Paladins, you could realistically maintain this rotation at the cost of butchering the entire design of Holy Paladins, which is very, very disruptive to the base Paladin gameplay. Now let's switch things up a little bit with examples of what I think are excellent hero talent designs. It doesn't mean perfect, and it doesn't mean that these things are ready to go for the launch of War Within, but so far the early impressions of these talents have been pretty above what everybody else has expected. Starting off with the Frostfire Mage, which I think is my favorite. The basic talent you should start off with is a haste or a mastery stacking buff, which is fairly boring, but Frostfire Bolt is an ability that's fairly easy to acquire, and since it replaces your basic spells and abilities, you will be able to maintain haste and mastery stacks quite easily. Where it does get better though is with talents that allow you to generate the opposite element more naturally, with passives for Comet Storm and even Meteor combination depending on your spec, while also being able to interweave fire and cold abilities to help you reach max stacks much easier. Later players will be able to pick up a way to make Frostfire an instant cast ability, which I think would be really easy to incorporate as part of either Fire or Frost playstyle, and especially with the extra damage that it provides, it becomes very much a high priority ability in single target or in AoE. With a capstone potentially even allowing you to maintain this buff permanently, as long as all of the hero talent procs are good and are plentiful. If it works as I imagine, this would allow mages to really dip into Fire or Frost as either spec, while still retaining the core idea of how Frost mages shatter their enemies with lances and flurries, while Fire mages blast their targets with Pyroblasts and Fireblasts. You still retain what makes the spec yours. Reading all of these talents, it sounds like everything interweaves with one another so well, with a capstone that I think ties it off very nicely. The other one that a lot of players actually get excited for is the Chrono Warden Evoker, which is shared between Preservation and Augmentation playstyles, which is going to prioritize buffing your allies similar to the Oracle Priest. The very first starting talent as well as the capstone won't necessarily change your overall rotation unless the Echoes of Living Flame are also meant to potentially generate your Essence Burst, which could be huge. The biggest part of Chrono Warden is the Tip the Scales ability, which now becomes a proper 20-second cooldown. When you first use it, it'll buff all of your allies as well as yourself, granting you additional cooldown reduction, but also allowing you to use your own resources to prolong the damage output buff that you give to your allies. And that's pretty much the core of the Chrono Warden. The left-hand side of the talent tree is mostly focused on buffing yourself, with good standalone choices that will simply alter the way that you deal with mobility or how you handle damage defensively, while the right-hand side of the tree will buff empowerment abilities, which are still core towards the Tip the Scales output, but nothing super crazy. But the change of how you utilize an ability that's not really a cooldown and changing that into a proper cooldown for the class is an interesting concept. And I think this is where a lot of the goodness can come from a lot of these hero talents, changing things to be a little bit more interesting and more unique, while offering a very straightforward playstyle of supporting your allies, which can be shared by both Augmentation and Preservation easily. So far, we've seen the good and we've seen the bad of the hero talents, but let's talk about some of the mediocre options that could be good but don't quite fit well with the community, starting with the Keeper of the Grove Boomkin, which I keep calling Grove Guardian for some reason. For the Grove Guardian Boomkins, you'll gain the ability that offers you a compelling 1-minute damage profile, which is very burst focused, which gives Boomkins theoretically good damage output outside of their incarnation windows, which typically allows them to be very effective every 3 minutes and then have quite a bit of downtime in between. However, tying the Grove Guardian playstyle to your trees, the tree ants that you spawn, something Boomkins don't really play with or haven't really played with this entire expansion, doesn't quite match the fantasy of this Grove Guardian that many Druid players had in mind. And for many of those Druid players, they imagined the Elune's Chosen, which is the other hero spec of the Balance Druid, to be the ultimate embodiment of the arcane powers of the Balance spec. And it does it pretty well with talents that enhance your arcane damage, as well as abilities such as Incarnation, Full Moon, Fury of Elune, and etc. But the Grove Guardian should have been a reflection of that, thematically, and it should have been something that embodies nature abilities, buffing things like Sunfire, your Wrath, and even your Mushrooms to be more thematically consistent. Trees, however, don't necessarily meet the Druid fantasy, this nature Druid archetype. I feel like thematically there's a lot of cool things they could have done, like maybe make Grove Guardians now a pet that you summon and you can maybe refresh those pets or empower them. So now the Boomkin can run around with these trees, then I have completely new bits of gameplay to them. Like there's probably a way to make it more of an interesting, compelling, and unique playstyle while still offering the player quite a bit of a damage benefit in the process. Another class spec that didn't quite hit the mark is the Sinlayan Death Knight, which starts out with a talent that grants you a haste stacking buff, which is generally nice. Building up a secondary stat for most players is generally not as exciting, even though haste is going to improve the flow of the gameplay in the long process. Gift of the Sinlayan will be one of the first talents I want to really highlight for Death Knights because it will adjust the way that they play depending on Blood and Unholy. For Blood specifically, it essentially turns Vampiric Blood, a defensive, into an offensive ability. And during Van Blood, with the Gift of Sinlayan, it gives you free reign to bathe with vampiric strikes with every single global, as well as to gain double of that haste buff benefit. Tanks, for the most part, are defensive players who prefer to use their cooldowns to mitigate boss mechanics. This talent turns the defensive ability into an offensive trait. It kind of butchers the entire point of being a tank, which many Blood Death Knights hold such an opinion of. But this can be easily remedied by switching it out from a defensive to another offensive ability, maybe one that has a lower impact cooldown to better match its talent and playstyle, which I think would seem like an overall easy fix. Then we have Unholy Death Knights, who have a rotational change through the talent of Infection of Sorrow, which causes vampiric strikes to consume your diseases, causing them to deal 200% of leftover damage instantly. On one hand, this could offer a very fun, bursty playstyle, especially in AoE encounters, where vampiric strikes can then cleave all targets while standing in death and decay, since they're basically scourge strikes, and paired together with Swarm, which automatically refreshes your dots on targets, and you got a winning combination rotation. But on the flip side, it does force Death Knights to use Outbreak to refresh their dots a lot more often, which can maybe result in a clunky rotation. Just imagine using Outbreak, then Vampiric Strike, and then refreshing your dots with Outbreak again because of this dot consumption. And honestly, I'm not exactly sure what you can do about this mechanic. So far, I've tried to offer ideas or suggestions, but it's kind of eluded me thus far as I'm writing the script. On one side, it does make things a bit more different or even interesting when it comes to breaking barriers on how your rotational spells are to be used, but I still prioritize reducing clunkiness above all of it. Even if it does increase your damage output, I'd rather not have this mechanic in game if it creates for a worse experience. So to conclude it all, at the end of the day, Blizzard did state during BlizzCon back in 2023 that they want to get these talents into the hands of players as soon as possible. And the main idea behind the hero talents, in my opinion, is solid. And they wish to use the hero talent system as a way to pave new ways for our classes to evolve going forward over borrowed power systems, while still drawing on inspirations such as artifact weapons for this expansion. The design team is also coming up with wacky new ideas for classes, which I do not hate. I don't want the game to stagnate, I don't want fresh new ideas to always be on the table, but at the same time they're not married to any of the gameplay additions thus far. Everything from the talents themselves, the gameplay changes, and even the names and the fantasies of these hero talents are all on the table when it comes to things that could change going forward. And that's probably, I think, the best case scenario that we can expect thus far. Similar to the Dragonflight design process and how we were able to adjust from borrowed powers to actual class talents, having a proper dialogue between players and the devs to create new ways for our characters to grow stronger, while focusing on fun gameplay, complementary talents, and even greater focus on creating variety of class builds, I think should be at the core of changes going forward. And I think it's, for me at least, too early to completely write off the hero talent system altogether, not until I get to see a little bit more work being done on the alpha and the beta of War Within, which actually should be playable kind of soon if we were to go off of the 2024 content roadmap. After giving some time and talking to my chat the other day about this entire system, my excitement for hero talents hasn't changed. I'm still very much stoked for this entire expansion of the hero talents and how they basically work somewhat like subspecs, and I'm very excited to see how this system will evolve during the iterative process of the alpha and the beta and the release of the War Within expansion. It's a bit of a long one, but this should cover everything that I think regarding hero talents going forward. There's a couple fixes that I would like to see, and I think a lot of them are easy ones, and I imagine a lot of the changes in iteration will come in once we have a playable alpha on our hands. I think it's still too early to write them off, and I think once we actually have something that's playable, something that we can actually test for ourselves, we'll have a much better idea of how these things will function. But as per usual, if you guys want to let me know your thoughts down below, what do you think about hero talent system? Are you excited for it or not really? If you're not excited and you think it's potentially bloated or too complicated, what changes would you want to see to make the system less so? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.